deck lists ready to go for our primary match. We're going to start with Jonathan Hobbs versus Zoe Riederman. Let's go ahead and bring them up. Hobbs on 4-color blink. These 4-color piles, there's kind of a few different ways to approach the construction of the decks, but they all pretty much are based on planeswalkers and the pitch incarnations.
Yeah, for sure. There are other notable cards in here, like Expressive Iteration as a 4 of, Omnath as a 4 of. Even now, a newer inclusion to the deck is Ragavan. I mean, basically, this deck is all value cards. Every single card you can find a way to get a 2-for-1, and then the idea is that you just play good cards on deck. Soup. This is what this is, right?
Yeah.
And it's, for me, pretty delicious. I can understand may not be everyone's flavor, but should have a pretty interesting matchup here against Living End. Notable cards that I'm looking at. There's one copy of Endurance. I'm trying to see if there are any maybe copies of things like Eladrami's Call to tutor it up. Not that I see there.
Yeah,
But like you mentioned, yeah,
there are a
Fury,
pair.
Solitude.
There are a pair in the second row there of Eldarmy's Call. And another interaction that I think is worth mentioning that we saw yesterday is Wrenn and Six with the channel lands, which really is just another way to late game card advantage. I mean, just have more capabilities in your deck. And we actually saw Wrenn and Six with Sokenzan generating tokens every single turn as chump blockers. That was
Sweet, yeah.
yeah. And so this is kind of, these builds aren't stock because there are elemental versions, there are more controllers versions, there's the blink versions, but we see a lot of the similarities. And then Jonathan Hobbs will be facing Zoe Riederman, as we mentioned, playing the Living End deck. Now, this is a completely different deck than we just saw. Very focused on what it wants to be doing. It wants to cycle or activate abilities to put creatures into the graveyard, bring them all back at once, and just end the game in one fell swoop.
Yep. And looking at this list here, I mean, most of this is stock. I think for me, the most exciting inclusion are the 2 copies of Otawara, the Soaring City. One notable problem with this deck is, you do have to cascade into Living End. And the worst enemy to cascade is, well, it rhymes with Teferi Time Raveler. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry. But yeah, being able to bounce Teferi Time Raveler with Otawara Soaring City is a huge interaction in this matchup and might be what, changes the pace of game one, or, like in post-board games, we'll see. But generally speaking, Teferi causes huge problems for that early aggressive, Shardless Agent or Violent Outburst into Living End. And maybe this is what it's going to take to change that game one matchup. I mean, in general, though, I do think it is favorable for Living End. Just combo in general, you have a very direct game plan, but there are certain tools that will be in the 4-color blink deck that are just annoying to deal with.
Right. And there is counter magic, there's force of negation, there is subtlety out of the board. So there is some interaction here, but really it's kind of all in on the Living End. I mean, hard casting creatures can sort of work in a longer game, but that's not something I think Zoe's ever going to rely on. And just trying to overpower the 4-color deck as things, get developing in the early going. So if the players are ready and waiting for us, we can go down there. Okay, they are. So let's go ahead and go down to the table, and the players are set. We are set for the top 8 of the Energy 20K Showdown. We'll put the Okay, so we see a couple land drops here in the early going. As we get things started, we'll get the price pool up for you, between rounds or at some convenient point. But I can tell you the 20K overall price pool, and of significance to a lot of these players, the winner of this event gets automatic entry into the NRG Championship at the end of the year.
That is an awesome prize here. Just as awesome as these. I'm looking at the 4-color blink deck, and it looks pretty teched out with the good arts here. It looks like a Raugrin Triome coming into play. I also pay note to the Yorion that is it looks like the foil extended art version. So we are definitely committed to this deck, which is exciting.
Yeah, you and I already 5 minutes in the broadcast, we are at odds. You are my enemy. I am not, as having done commentary for a while now, I am not a fan of alternate arts and foil nonsense, colorized altered versions, as it just makes our job harder. But it's good that you appreciate it. So we start off with a cycled Curator of Mysteries here for Zoe. Hobbs without a Wrenn and Six to kick things off, or a Ragavan, so not an aggressive start, at least among what his deck is capable of doing.
Ooh, okay. And I like this too. Main phase, one cycle. Maybe get a little bit more information if you like find a grief. That is going to be also a pretty good card here in game one. But turn two is generally speaking, now that Simian Spirit Guide has been gone for a while, so you're pretty safe on turn two, right? So I think that's why we're seeing the lands develop tapped on the 4-color blink side. And now is when we have to get a little bit cautious with what could happen here. And this is incredible right here.
Yeah. And Teferi Time Raveler is really the main deck lock piece control card that Hobbs is looking for in the matchup. And we saw Riederman cycling, looking for a grief, looking for a force negation. Neither one found, and already this is the worst case scenario for Zoe to kick things off here.
Yeah, as soon as turn 3 too. So maybe we just have to engage in our backup plan of hardcast creatures, turn them sideways, hope for the best. Or we're still digging for those 2 Otawara Soaring Cities, but those aren't unlocked until turn 4 because it's 3 and a blue to channel on the end step.
Right. So yeah, Zoe now has got some uphill battling to do here, as the Cascade mechanic just doesn't work with Teferi Time Raveler in play.
And I think I do see a copy of Shardless Agent in Zoe's hand, which means that this Teferi was literally right on time. Could have even been a play draw difference that could have dictated the course of this game one. But looks like we get an untap here with Teferi after land drop for Zoe.
Yeah. Now, things are certainly not over with for Zoe Riederman here, as you're saying how, Otawara takes some mana to get going, but Hobbs is not exactly like bursting onto the battlefield aside from this Teferi here. So Zoe will have potentially time to get things going. And as is kind of unusual as far as mechanics and cards go, channel is significantly cannot be countered or really interacted with from Jonathan Hobbs' entire deck.
That is absolutely true. I mean, you could try to find like trick binds, stifles, squelches, weird things like that, but
Right.
that hasn't seen the light of day in Modern, and I don't even know how long. Meanwhile, this Expressive Iteration finds a Solitude and a Ragavan, both of which I think are kind of nice to have here. But looks like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I guess maybe we are light on mana, and that's why we're taking the land here. Or if there's a 2-mana spell that we want to cast instead of the Ragavan, I guess that makes a lot of sense because if you think about Ragavan's effectiveness in this matchup, what are you really hitting from the other side? In terms of like cards that you can draw from your opponent's deck, probably not that many.
That is definitely true. I mean, there's a fair number of 7 drops in there that Hobbs isn't probably getting onto the board. He could be on the hope to mill all 3 living ends and exile them. I mean, that would be a way to cripple the deck, but yeah, outside of something like that, it's really unlikely to work. However, I do feel like there's still arguments for Ragavan, as what are we hoping Solitude's really going to do? If Living End goes off, Hobbs will probably likely be overwhelmed. And if it doesn't, then there may not be much use for it.
Yeah, so I think maybe the current game plan here is I have Teferi, and I want to make sure this Teferi stays in play as long as possible. And I identify the only way that Teferi can get got here is, whoa, okay, this is the Channel Turtle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is Colossal Sky Turtle, which was an addition to these decks as has been printed in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, a 7-mana uncommon that has 2 different channel abilities. One is to bounce a creature, the other is to pick a card up from the graveyard. And we saw their Curator of Mysteries return to hand. So Zoe potentially looking at hard casting and trying to get in and kill Teferi that way, which in this case, Jonathan Hobbs will be very much paid off for taking the Solitude off that iteration.
Exactly. And this is what I was trying to say earlier is that, I mean, once Teferi is in play, you just have to hard cast your creatures from the living end side, right? And go in one at a time, or remove the Teferi from play, like with through other means. And if you're going through the linear creature route, I mean, that's where the 4-color blink deck exceeds in providing its shields and its defenses, right? Because you have Solitudes, you've got Furies, you've got Bolts and Marches, and I mean, like half your deck is basically removal at this point. So I can totally understand holding on the Solitude for that. It's not the best card post living end because, like you mentioned, right, there's already 3 creatures in the graveyard, and what is an evoked Solitude going to do against all of that, right? And these creatures have decent stats too. But this plan right here, something is completely manageable, maintainable.
Yeah. Here's another roadblock. A Ice-Fang Coatl comes into play. Doesn't look like it's anywhere close to having Death Touch, but it'll still be able to chump block and preserve Teferi if Solitude, for some reason or other, doesn't work out. So Zoe, I mean, knows this is an uphill battle, just up against this Teferi here. And this is kind of one of those scenarios that we may see later on today in Legacy with the Monarch mechanic, where something in the game has changed, and now the focus of both players is one particular interaction or one particular card, not the opponent's life total, not anything else. It's all about this Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah. Yeah. And this sort of just goes to show how powerful it is in the matchup. I mean, like when you have a linear deck like Living in game one at least, that is trying to do one thing and one thing only, and then your opponent is like, well, I have the one card that stops your one thing. And now you can see like it's basically just like a almost like the concept of like a floodgate, right? Like this Teferi is trying to hold down as much as possible, but as soon as that card leaves the battlefield, boom, it's just gonna be carnage.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, Courier of Mysteries, 4/4 flyer with a lot of work to do here, and Hobbs will just make a land drop and pass the turn with, as we know, Solitude at the ready.
Yeah. And if you're in Zoe's seat, I mean, one does not simply pass with 5 mana open in the top 8 of the NRG Series 20K, right? So Zoe probably knows there's a Solitude somewhere waiting in the wings, and so now we need to figure out our plan for that. Start by cycling and getting some more information.
And Jonathan Hobbs will go ahead and respond to the cycled Architects of Will with Hardcast Solitude on the Curator of Mysteries. So this, in addition to clearing out the flyer, will also present somewhat of a clock now. So we will gain 4 life, but Hobbs with 4 power on the board doesn't have to worry about flash creatures coming in because of Teferi Time Raveler. So able to start swinging in for 4 a turn.
Yeah, which is also super, super. I mean, this is a very good concept that you're bringing up here. Okay, we're going to see a Shardless Agent come into play here. Cascade is still going to trigger, but you won't be able to cast the card that you cascade into. So I think a Living End will get shuffled to the bottom of the deck. We see one of the Otawaras. Okay, that's good for Jonathan being able to see that it's not in the hand. Gives you a little bit to prep for. But in the meantime, you did bring. Oh, there's the second one too.
Yeah.
You did bring up a very good concept from the control side of things, which is closing the game out, right? If you give your opponent too much time, they'll find a way to get rid of the Teferi, like, with the Soaring City or hard casting enough creatures. Closing the game with creatures, make sure that, your opponent doesn't have that inevitability that could get rid of the Teferi and then, unlock Living End in any number of ways.
Right. So with 2 copies of Otawara going to the bottom half of the deck here, Zoe, fortunate to have a Misty Rainforest in play, able to shuffle those back in the deck as she wants them in hand, not hiding out at the bottom of the deck waiting for another day. But Hobbs also benefits from that information. This is the top 8. Deck lists are open now, unlike yesterday. So Hobbs was able to look at her deck list beforehand, and if he keyed in on that particular card, which Hobbs, an experienced player, knows what's important in the matchup, probably did so, now knows that at least for the time being, there is not an Otawara in Zoe's hand.
Right. But that could change. This is magic. It could be right there on top of the deck or maybe a card under. You have to be cautious when you're playing these sort of quote control piles because, if you make one, even the simplest of missteps, right, the whole game could just implode on itself. Your entire plan, your entire board, your entire life total. So good that Hobbs is slowly progressing. I mean, applying pressure where you can, but in a safe manner.
This was okay. So Hobbs plays Wrenn and Six. Looked like the plan was to pick up the fetch line. Instead, just played another one from hand first. So Wrenn and Six not activated as of yet, but now we know that's another inevitable clock in a way, as well as providing a flood of land drops. And as we know, these 4-color blink decks can use all the mana that they're given.
Yeah, okay. So it looks like, I mean, Wrenn and Six as another win condition is always a good thing too. Solitude on the board to protect from the Shardless Agent, keep that Teferi alive. Again, the Wrenn and Six in this matchup, I'll tell you right now, Wrenn and Six is not the greatest. I mean, it's a very grindy card, good at getting your land drops into play. But when you analyze again, like what this matchup is about, which is the card Living End, it's just not the text on Wrenn and Six doesn't really apply to it.
Okay, here we see Boseju taking out Spiral of Canal, and then perhaps that's what Hobbs is waiting for to activate his Wrenn and Six. And I have certainly never seen a game where Boseju plus Wrenn and Six ran a player out of lands, but I don't know. This game could take a while. Maybe that's Hobbs' plan.
It is a plan. I mean, you could target one of the sources. Looks like we went after the blue-red one. Do we just
Mhm.
continue going after the blue-red sources?
But yeah, perhaps. I mean, certainly targeting the red. There's only a single red source in play, although the Rainforest can likely find another one. But there is, only so many fetchable lands in a deck that produce each color.
Right. Now, what's interesting is like if we do cut off the red, what are we even cutting off in terms of relevant spells here? The good news is that Otawara is all blue. It's 3 and a blue. Your Cascade. I guess Violent Outburst requires a little bit of red.
Right.
Um,
I think that's it. That is a significant one, but it's also not a crucial card, as though we can work around it with Shardless Agent, but it is nice to have. And here is an attack with Shardless Agent, trading off with Solitude. Okay, I mean, gets it off the board. I'm going to say I don't know if I love that, as if a Living End does happen, I feel like I'd rather have the Solitude and Shardless Agent staring at each other in play rather than coming back into play from the Living End. But okay.
Yeah, I can see it both ways. Like you want the Solitude in play, but then also like if the Solitude's in play, how are you ever going to connect with to the Teferi?
Yeah.
Weird stories. It's like a really weird double bind, and this is the pressure that Teferi applies, right? When one card can literally shut down your entire game plan, or at least your primary game plan of like the Cascade, your entire like heuristics for the game they get flipped on their head, and this is not the game that Living In wants to play. I'll tell you that much.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. All right. So Hobbs with another Solitude in hand. Uh, just a small clock here, but at least it is a clock alongside the Planeswalkers. I mean, Wrenn and Six picking up again, picking up the Boseju again, and Zoe this time searched out a forest. Not necessarily implying that there isn't any red sources in the deck, but that there's no reason to throw them out there to get blown up, as the Misty Rainforest can fetch them up when she wants them, instead of letting Hobbs just pick them off one by one.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like Hobbs choosing to go after the steam vents does indicate a game plan. Zoe picks up on that instantly, and like you mentioned, there's no reason. Now I'm a little bit nervous here because it looks like Hobbs is slowly pulling ahead, far enough ahead to the point where this game might be wrapped up here. I have to wonder what Zoe's plan is from here. Passing the turn with 6 open mana is definitely
Mhm.
what Hobbs wants to see. No board, nothing to worry about, but these cyclers, you never know what could actually be waiting in the hand there.
Right. Okay, so across for 1. Long way to go as far as life total goes, but Wrenn and Six getting closer, up to 5. Ultimate's at 7. And I mean, Zoe could just be sitting on multiple cycle activations, hoping into Otawara, but it's just nothing at this point. If you're in Hobbs' chair here, I mean, you're obviously in fantastic position, but you're still kind of a little bit stressed. I mean, these games when you're solidly ahead, doesn't you still want to keep control of them? You don't want to let one slip away, as Breeding Pool gets wiped out here by Boseju. And you know what? I'm not sure that Zoe fetched a land at all that time.
Yeah, that is a bad sign. I mean, if you're rooting for Living End here, because if we're out of fetchables, then this game plan of just nuke all your mana sources looks like it's going to work here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, if Zoe's actually out, then those 3 fetch lands are dead, and she's working with 2 land right now.
Which means you can't even cast Shardless Agent. You can't cast, yeah, and you can see here maybe picking up the cards, and we're gonna go to game 2 here. Yeah, that was actually kind of incredible. I think this is the first for me. I'm gonna get my like bingo check card out here and mark off Boseju Wrenn and Six finally won its first game. That's cool. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I speculated about that, I wasn't actually seriously implying it would happen. But yeah, looking at the deck list, Zoe has 6 fetchable lands, and
Hmm.
I guess that was all of them in play or in the graveyard, and that was it. So Jonathan Hobbs just incapacitates the entire deck, first with Teferi and then with Boseju. Now, there is some help to be gained from the sideboard here for Zoe Riederman. Aware of the problem card, which is Teferi Time Raveler. Subtlety is an additional way to do that. So is Mystical Dispute. So there are options now.
Yeah, I
Well,
think going into game two, we're going to see a lot more fighting on the stack here.
mhm,
Subtlety, like you mentioned, very good inclusion. Dispute as well. On top of that, you still have your 4 copies of the main deck Force of Negation, and on turn two, or maybe even earlier, you have access to Grief as well, right? So
right.
a lot of tools here. I mean, the Living End, the problem card in the matchup is Teferi, and you play around that turn three. You mulligan appropriately, make sure that you have everything you need.
Right, absolutely. So if we go ahead and look at Jonathan Hobbs's list, we'll see what he picks up in the sideboard. We know he's got in the main deck, and we're looking for, I guess, graveyard hate, and we're looking for ways to defend Teferi, and we see some of each.
Wow, I see a lot of good cards here in the sideboard. So
Yeah.
the first one that catches my obviously is Endurance. Endurance is going to be very good at just getting rid of a graveyard entirely in response to Living In being cast off the Cascade. But also kind of cheeky, I see 3 copies of Chalice of the Void in the sideboard, which is kind of cool. I mean, you put it on 0 and then Living End doesn't resolve ever. So looks like knowing that these are open deck lists, if we bring in the Chalice, maybe Zoe brings in the Foundation Breakers, and now you have like, levels, which is
Mhm.
one of the really cool things about Magic and just like open deck lists in general is just you have to really like play the player more than you're just playing against the deck now.
So, Anurag, you've played a lot of tournament Magic. Let me just get confirmation here. You have to submit your sideboard before the tournament, right? Not before the top 8, because Jonathan Hobbs looks incredibly well set up for this matchup.
This is I do agree. This is like next level. I mean, like, but if you think about it, right? Like these cards are very versatile, and that's one of the
Mhm.
pros to playing 4-color Blink is that your cards just do so much. Like it's incredible, right? Like Endurance is a heavy hitter, like Chalice of the Void, multiple matchups where Chalice of the Void is good. Like I would imagine wanting that card against like Grixis Death Shadow, for example. You also evaluate like how many 1-drops you really have in your main deck, right? And it's dicey sometimes, but I don't know. I think personally that like this is just a well-built sideboard. You also got like the versatility of like Supreme Verdict, Veil of Summer, all around. It just feels like Hobbs's deck is equipped with the tools to win a variety of matchups. Now, I don't know if you're going to win all your matchups, but there's certain matchups in mind, and you can see here, like with the Chalice, Living In was definitely one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Living End really has been rising post Loris ban to a higher place in the metagame tier, and Jonathan Hobbs, clearly not ignorant of that fact, came ready for the matchup and is rewarded here now, facing in the top 8 with a almost insurmountable set of hate cards here with Teferi, Endurance, Chalice of the Void. I mean, this is and Counterspell. This is a lot.
It really is. But I mean, like, Zoe did have a 7-1-1 record at the end of yesterday,
Mhm.
and throughout that day, must have played against some number of 4-color control decks. And so,
Yeah.
it's not just about like one deck list versus the other. There is also like tension in the first couple of turns where you have to set up, just like pressure points in the matchup. So like Living In, like, you can like sandbag. You can draw into like, 1 or 2 griefs, or you can um, draw into multiple pieces of interaction before uh, the actual fight happens, and then like overload your opponent. So, on the turn that things actually happen, I do expect to see like multiple copies of either Subtlety, Mystical Dispute. Like Zoe knows that these cards are in the deck list, right? So you're not just gonna like run out your Shardless Agent on turn 3. You have to like tactically, strategically choose the right time to go off, and you have to have good enough reasons why. That being said, there's gonna be like a very small window, I predict, in game 3 where things will go right for Zoe, and you have to have the right cards at the right time, and so it'll
Mhm.
still be very tricky.
Yeah. All right. So we can go ahead and go back down the table now as the players are presenting for game number 2. And yeah, the tools exist. Even though we're talking about how Jonathan has a lot of cards, he can only draw so many of them. Zoe does have the tools to fight back. We saw a match yesterday in round number 8 where Living End deck double force of negation and then cascaded on turn 3 to win the game. So
Yeah.
I mean, there are the tools exist here to fight back. And like you're saying, there's Foundation Breaker. There's things to deal with some of these hate cards. So it's not just the contents of the deck list. The players do have to play the games, and we will see if Zoe Riederman is able to even up this match.
There's a reason 3 of these decks made the top 8,
Right.
and like, I mean, similarly, you could say there's the reason, Hobbs is here, number 2 seed, probably played against a lot of Living End, maybe had a very good record in this event against Living End, I would imagine so. But, in the top 8, this is when the person sitting on the other side is someone that you really need to respect. And, you know, in this game too as well, something that's going to be very important, Zoe will be on the play, right? We saw what happened in game 1 where on turn 3, because Jonathan was on the play, he was able to play his Teferi on turn 3 on the play, right? And we
Mhm.
literally saw in Zoe's hand was a copy of Shardless Agent. So this time around, that could be the difference that makes one uh strategy win over the other.
Right, right, absolutely. All right. So we'll see if we get any surprises this game. Certainly, I would say game 1, Zoe running out of lands in the deck was a surprise.
Mhm.
To us, maybe to her, probably to some of the viewers at home. And we'll see what surprises are in store as Jonathan Hobbs takes a mulligan here. Pretty easy to mulligan any hand that doesn't look great when you have a 0 mana hate card for your opponent. In fact, actually 2 sets with Endurance and Chalice of the Void.
Now, there's one thing to consider here,
All
which
right.
is yes, you might have a literal billion hate cards for this matchup, but also consider that you're playing Yorion. So you're the math, the numbers, they're not exactly quite the same here. A billion is actually more like, I mean, like in Yorion terms, that's probably like 5. You know what I mean? Like, so you could see here, Jonathan is mulling very aggressively, going
Mhm.
from 7 down to 6, now down to 5, because you just sometimes don't find those hate cards you're looking for, thanks to the bird serpent, the wet noodle, the I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's yeah,
No, yeah,
just
you're no,
Yorion
you're
things.
you're absolutely right. And you get to the point where no, we don't. Maybe Hobbs is mulling unplayable hands, but if on the search for hate cards here, even if you find them, you become more and more vulnerable to random nonsense like hardcast striped Riverwinder on turn 7, while Hobbs is on 2 land and 2 Chalice of the Void, and then just dies. So we'll see. It looks like 5 cards is the keep. And we'll get things going. Looks like Ragavan, Ice-Fang Coatl. I mean, those are nice cards, but those are not hate cards.
This does not look like it's gonna be pretty. I think I see a copy of Counterspell. That might be the saving grace,
Mhm,
but on a mulligan to 5, when your opponent has all the subtleties, all the griefs, all the mystical disputes, like you can just get run over, right? I mean,
mhm. Yeah, yeah, we'll see. All right, we see Living End on the bottom of the deck, which is the ideal place for it, but it's going to get shuffled in here. As long as as long as multiple Living Ends aren't drawn, it's really not diminishing the capabilities of the deck. And I don't know that this is a matchup where we're going to see Zoe need multiple Living Ends to resolve. Probably, maybe the first one. The battle is going to be the result of the first one, not recovering from a Supreme Verdict or something like that after the first one resolves. But still, Hobbs, you think brings in Supreme Verdict here as a potential cleanup?
yeah, it's better than nothing. The problem is like you verdict the board, and then if there is another living end, you just
Yeah.
feel really bad because everything that you got rid of just comes right back. But again, that's like part of the power of living end, right? Like
Mhm.
built-in resiliency against sweepers. So, except for one sweeper in mind, Terminus, so good. What? Sorry.
Hey, there's other ones too. There's like Hallowed Burial, things like that. But yeah, Terminus would be, yeah, of course you would bring that up. I see your deck list in the MTGO event this week. Still got a Terminus in the deck
Can't
somehow.
keep me away from it's.
I
It's like an unhealthy addiction.
so Zoe with a couple cyclers on turn 1. And yeah, this is something where in almost any other deck, you would just save those kinds of things to respond to the opponent. But here with main phase Grief, Zoe is incentivized to do her cycling right away and does so. Doesn't find one, but that's presumably what she's looking for.
Yeah. Also, I mean, if we talk about cards that could potentially get you back in the game here, I think turn 1 Ragavan is definitely very interesting for 2 reasons. Okay, the first is, well, you could steal something that is useful to one or the other, right? Like if you get rid of like a sideboard card, for example, that'd be sweet.
Mhm.
But I think the real reason that Ragavan is powerful here is that you're really just down on cards, right? You're on a mulligan to 5, and you don't want to invest cards from your hand for mana, right? Like you don't want to make like a billion land drops this game. You do need a billion mana to cast most of your spells, but you don't want to necessarily put that many lands into play. So the treasure generation that comes from the monkey is going to be
Mhm.
super powerful here. It allows you to focus more on just like casting actual spells, doing actual things, and not just going like land, okay, here's a 5-drop or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right, right, exactly. And it does allow for, potentially something like turn 3 Teferi or turn 2 Teferi.
Yeah.
With the treasure. I mean, that is really skipping a land drop, and like you were saying, yeah, Hobbs has to be short something with a 5-card hand. If he short lands, Ragavan makes up for it. So
If I'm correct from earlier and seeing that counterspell, I would hazard that, we're just going to see Hobbs attack, play a land, pass the turn.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay,
that
I
would be
like
reasonable.
this.
Yeah, so Waker of Waves here, looking for grief or interaction. I believe there is a Violent Outburst in hand,
Okay.
so that's covered. There's a Street Wraith is the card that goes to the graveyard. So whatever was found there was something Zoe was in the mood for. Otherwise, the Street Wraith would have been selected to just randomly look for something. So that would imply that she's comfortable with her hand.
There's the grief.
Okay, so grief in hand. Does it run out now or does it wait? It looks like it waits.
Okay, I hold my breath here because this is the turn where Jonathan's going to have a really good turn too.
Mm-hmm. So Architects of Will flips over from Ragavan. That is effectively worthless, which is what almost any card would be. And does Hobbs have a play here? Ice-Fang Coatl doesn't count.
All right, I just want to see fireworks right now. I'm not even going to lie. Game 1 was a landslide victory in Hobbs's favor. I want to see a game 3. So Zoe, just go off. This is you.
Mm-hmm. Now, if it is an outburst, Zoe could wait, could pass the turn here, which would turn on Force of Negation potentially if she has copies of that. But if you saw Grief in hand, that would likely come out here, even if Outburst is available to engage the fight on Hobbs's turn. So we'll see. We'll see what Zoe's got to offer for us.
And the really cool thing about Grief too, I mean, okay, let alone the fact that it goes to the graveyard to feed your living ends, it comes back and does cool things. Okay. One card that we talked about earlier during the deck tech was Eladrami's Call, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grief versus Eladrami's Call works very profitably where you either take the Eladrami's Call or the Eladrami's Call finds like endurance, and you just get to take the endurance, right? So I think this is I like playing this in the main phase right now. Just see what's in hand and get rid of what you can.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you have Grief, if you have Eladrami's Call and Counterspell, okay,
there's
two counterspells. Okay, never mind.
2 counterspells, Wrenn and Six, and Ice-Fang Coatl. Well, this is not bad for Hobbs here on a mold of 5. I mean, Wrenn and Six, once he finds the time to get it on the board, can get things rolling mana-wise. 2 spots of interaction, another cantrip. I mean, this is not bad. So Zoe's going to need more than just a Von Outburst here.
Right, and I think I may have seen a subtlety in the hand as well. We're going to take one counterspell here for sure. I mean, there's only one way to get through all this, right? It's just a one by one punch through. I mean, you have so many Cascade cards in your deck, though, that I wouldn't be terribly worried about just one counterspell, but obviously you are put at a halt right now until you find a way to get through it. So,
yeah.
And one interesting strategy that you can do, I mean, we might see like if you have 2 copies, you just end step the Violent Outburst, pressure your opponent's mana, make them tap out,
right,
and then untap and fire off again. You can see it here being done in the upkeep. Perfect. This is a time walk. So I would have to imagine if we're just going off right now that we actually do have a second Cascade card in hand.
A second one. Yeah. Okay. So fetch land activation here. Yeah. Or a Force of Negation potentially, as that now that it's Jonathan's upkeep, that will be free castable. So we will see. We'll wait with bated breath and see what Zoe Riederman can present here. Hobbs with
the
3 mana. Go ahead.
The way that Hobbs has his cards out, really, it really just reminds me of like back when you were playing with like Gitaxian Probe and your opponents would just do that. And I'm just slightly like lit up right now. That being said, though, this would be insane fireworks if the draw step is something crazy.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so here's Violent Outburst. Jonathan Hobbs, don't want to counterspell that. Okay, so here's the Cascade.
Oh, and actually looking at the mana, we have to use the treasure here. So
yeah, using the treasure, if Hobbs wins the counter fight, won't matter too much as Ragavan will generate a new treasure and then Wrenn and Six can come down and Living End just is countered. Okay.
Right. Hobbs wiping some sweat off the brow there, but there's more?
We'll see. Here comes Ragavan. All right. Street Wraith, another blank. Hobbs cannot cycle the Street Wraith as it's not in his hand. It is just castable.
Mm-hmm.
Zoe, life total getting lower.
Oh my. This is the Hail Mary. Okay, I see. So we drew a fetch land for the turn. Now we still know the entire hand here from Zoe's side. It's just the Ice-Fang and the Wrenn and Six, but the Ice-Fang could draw into one of the 4 endurances.
Right.
I also like main phasing the Ice-Fang because if you pick up a Chalice on put it on 0, I mean that's another way to buy a couple turns.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is not going to be a Wrenn and Six turn like you're suggesting. This is going to be Coatl and then Hope. But this is a Yorion deck, as you astutely pointed out. So Hobbs is drawing to one of his 11 or so. Well, not 11.
No, sorry. Yorion math. It's 5, Joe.
Yorion.
It's 5.
Yeah. I don't know what I just said, but you're right. Yorion is what we meant. And Coatl, and the draw is
hidden. Ooh, okay. All right. Not a Chalice. That much we know.
Endurance is live, though.
That is true. Wrenn and Six is a green card. We can pitch it. We could absolutely pop off here. Now, the reason I expect to see another Cascade card here, or I mean, maybe not. Like, maybe you're just trying to get rid of the counter spell from the hand. That's totally fine.
Otawara into play here. Yeah, but Zoe definitely needs. This would be the turn. There's a Foundation Breaker. Okay, well, so there is no backup as of yet. Ragavan will be prevented from doing further combat, and this game will continue.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think the monkey was kind of a problem. I mean, generating that mana was a big deal, right? Because it actually let you cast the counterspell when you had no other way to do it. So here, I do like, I mean, just getting rid of the treasure in general. This is, what's your favorite 4 mana sinkhole?
Right. Goblin Settler, obviously.
Okay, no. We don't say that card. That card has beaten me too many times in Legacy. Please respect the basic planes, all right? I was gonna say,
sorry.
like, can you just not pick like Avalanche Rider or something
Sorry,
like that?
Goblin Ruin Blaster. How about that one? All goblins all the time.
It's okay.
Come on.
You know what? I respect your love for goblins, Joe. I get it.
You have not lost repeatedly to Goblin Ruin Blaster, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, that much is true. You got me there.
Okay, so Ice-Fang Coatl swings in. Zoe falls to 6, I believe, which is, getting down there. There's Wrenn and Six, still in hand. I mean, it could just plink away at Zoe. 3 hits from Wrenn and Six, 3 more attacks from Coatl. It's 3-turn clock.
Check it out. That's a Supreme Verdict.
Oh. That's
interesting.
Yeah, so one issue with Supreme Verdict cleaning up post Living End is that if there's a grief in the graveyard, which there is, then it doesn't work. But yeah, that is a reasonable card for Hobbs to have. Here is the Wrenn and Six, pick up a land. And Zoe looking for a Cascade spell, as she's probably reasonably confident if she finds one, the Living End will resolve. But
yeah, plus your deck is so many cyclers, like that you can just like half your draws are redraws anyways, right? So I think there's a real chance between like before 6 life goes away that you have actually shot at doing what you need to do. I could have sworn I had seen a subtlety earlier in hand for Zoe, but maybe because we were tapped out, we don't have like a blue card. But then also, I don't even know if you would even subtlety a Wrenn and Six, because like I mentioned earlier, Wrenn and Six, not really what the matchup is about. Although you could find like Sokenzan or like, Otawara or things like that to make Wrenn and Six actually useful. But baseline heuristic is like, I don't even know if I would bother.
So Hobbs might be just sitting on some lands here. There's a Sokenzan. That's something with Wrenn and Six in play.
Okay, I spoke a bit too soon. Was that the draw for the turn? It must have been. That is actually a great draw. Yeah, you just start sending them in.
Yeah, there it is. So 2 tokens coming for Jonathan Hobbs, and then Wrenn and Six still to activate. Also, the tokens can attack, and Foundation Breaker, if it blocks, Wrenn and Six can just finish it off. Oh, everything in. If there is a subtlety, like you suggested there might be, this would be a good time for it, just to be able to pick off whatever Zoe chooses.
Yeah, probably get rid of the flyer so your other creatures can block. Yeah, here to go, flashing it into play now. But this is a little scary because we're at 6. We block
Yeah.
2. We take 2 more. We go down to 4. And Wrenn and Six conveniently also has 4 loyalty. So there's a world where, it just uses all that loyalty, takes down 4
Mhm.
times, and then wins the game. But obviously, Sokenzan is another. This Sokenzan Wrenn and Six combo is
Yeah,
it's
it's not bad.
nice.
Okay, so here is pick up Sokenzan. Subtlety does die to the Wrenn and Six shot after blocking Ragavan. And yeah, Zoe left for the 2-power attacker, which is not enough to kill Wrenn and Six. Okay, Hobbs decides, you know what, let's get this other land instead. And Zoe needs a Cascade spell right now,
Yeah.
or this is eventually over.
Ooh, turning sideways. Okay, that's a play.
Well, attacking would make sense if there is a living end incoming.
I want to see it. I want to see it so badly. Shardless Agent.
There it is. Okay,
Let's go.
we're in business. Shardless Agent will find living end, and then the board states will flip. Jonathan Hobbs will get back Ragavan, and I think that's it. And
Right,
Zoe will
and
get the business.
yeah. Last card in hand here is Supreme Verdict for Hobbs, which means that Grief will very happily take that away. And this is why this deck is insane. This is why there are 3 copies in the top 8, right? Because you just have this like one card, oops, I win button. And in Magic, one of the phrases that, as I was getting better as a player that I heard all the time was take your free wins when you can get it, right?
Sure.
That's why people said to play a mentor. Now, obviously, like I never, like took that advice because I played hard control for like 6 years in a row. Somebody just needed to give me the memo sooner, I guess. But this is why Living End is really good, because you just like, look, you basically look like you're dead on board here. Sokenzan, Wrenn and Six, all this good stuff, and then suddenly you're like, well, flip the table. Here comes like 8 creatures, and there's nothing you can really do about it. You're at 11.
Yeah, and I mean Hobbs's deck. We've talked about this extensively during the sideboarding period. Hobbs's deck is great at preventing living end from happening. Recovering from living end is a completely different story, and
Right.
one that he's likely going to have quite a bit of trouble with. He does have the great answer for it, Supreme Verdict, but he's going to lose it. And I mean, we talked about Zoe being life total getting low. Hobbs is 11. There is more than 11 power of creatures in play.
Okay, let's see the triggers. We got to make sure that. Yep, Grief. Okay, there goes the Supreme Verdict, and that is insane. I'm pretty sure there's only one Supreme Verdict in Hobbs's deck, anyways. So getting that out of the way right now is a huge, I guess, sigh of relief here for Zoe, because now you don't need to worry about like, yeah. Can you see?
Yeah. Wow. And there it is. So Hobbs with the ability to maybe Sokenzan for 2 blockers there, and then only taking about 15, which is plenty to kill him anyway. And we're going to a game 3.
I swear
Okay.
these players are paid actors, because the back and forth there, going all the way down to 4, finding the Sokenzan with the Wrenn and Six to make a card that's usually not good in the matchup, actually very close to lethal. This was a good game for both sides. I mean, also the mulligan down to 5 earlier.
Right.
Game 3 is going to be kind of interesting. I mean, we'll start with your thoughts, because I want to know what do you think?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I mean, we saw that was not a clean, overwhelm you game. That took some work. There was disruption from Hobbs. We saw the counterspells. We talked a lot about his sideboard cards, but it just plain old counterspells work just as well. Now Hobbs, a new hand going first. I don't know that going first is a huge advantage here, as Zoe's not going to threaten anything before turn 3 anyway. So it's just, can he find how brave are you mulling here for hate cards now? Going first, it's a little tougher.
Yeah,
you still gotta do it. You still have to. I mean, like in that last game, if endurance or chalice is drawn, Zoe's probably out of it.
right.
So
I do not think you're allowed to go second.
yeah,
Just
correct.
imagine like, yeah, imagine like a curve of like turn 1 Ragavan into turn 2 Teferi, right? Just the sound of that alone, it makes me happy, right? So I think we have to be on the play here. But yes, I do agree that you want to mulligan to some interaction. Maybe you get a little bit more time. You don't have to mulligan as aggressively to like double counterspell, because you're on the play and you can set some stuff up and things like that. But I do expect that here's the other thing too, right? Like mulliganing down to double interaction shows a lot of respect for the matchup, and I think that is smart. Like these combo decks, they're designed to be able to beat that first piece of interaction very easily. Otherwise, they wouldn't be good, straight up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to have multiple layers of defenses. Being on the play also turns on chalices, it turns on Teferi, and so I think you just take what you can when you can while you can. And so yeah, I do think it's kind of crazy because I mean in that game too, Hobbs didn't really have much going on. Counterspell is weird because it's good in the matchup, but it's not great in the matchup. It buys you some time, but you need to have like the surrounding cast in order to really, leverage the power of Counterspell, right? It's kind of like when you're playing like Tempo in Legacy, right? You need to have pressure on top of the interaction. Simply holding the Counterspell up, letting your opponent make their plays, they're going to draw out of it eventually, right? And we saw that's exactly what happened in that game too. So a little bit wary, but there are a lot of other tools. Question is whether Yorion will allow us to draw into them or not.
Yeah, sure. One other note about the play draw thing. Zoe now, like turn 3 is kind of the flashpoint for the deck, but as far as interaction goes, you want it as soon as possible. Now there's just one fewer turn of mana to cycle into preemptive answers like Grief, like Force of Negation, the Mystical Disputes, whatever there is. So we'll see. Players draw in their opening hands. Game 3 of the quarterfinals. Nerve Rage Gaming Modern 20K Showdown. Let's go. Hobbs, can we do better than 5 cards this time?
Yeah, I think I see a copy of Endurance, and wow, shuffling it away. Okay, that must have meant the rest of the hand was really bad.
Maybe. Maybe there wasn't a green card. Zoe is also going to take a mulligan. Okay.
That's always a good feeling when you put your hand back and you're like, I got to go down to 6, and then your opponent does the same. You're just like, oh, phew. That's okay. It's fine. It's not a lost game yet. Mulligans make me sad in general. That's why I rarely do mulligan. I mean, I lose. Losing doesn't make me sad. Mulliganing makes me sad.
I completely agree with that. I mean, yes, I would. Yeah, it's just deflating when you're giving cards away for free.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Why would you ever? It's draw cards or die. Quite frankly, and
I would rather get 2 for 1 than mulligan. It's the same, but one feels worse to me.
But that's probably why Hobbs is in second seed in the top 8 on the play game 3, and I'm not. You know what I mean? Good mulligans though. I think that it just shows a lot of respect for the matchup. And again, I do think, like I said earlier, ideally 2 pieces of interaction in the opener. Plus, like, just imagine like opening up with Chalice on turn 1. Like that makes you feel real good. So I can justify aggressive mulligans in this matchup. Speaking of Chalice, it was really good to see that Zoe did bring in the Foundation Breakers. With open deck lists, I think that makes a lot more sense. Maybe like in the Swiss, that's how Jonathan was able to win some games. Players not expecting the Chalice out of the 4-color deck.
Sure.
But here in the top 8 with open deck lists, the dynamic definitely changes, and so we'll see if that interaction does come up. Very interested.
Okay. Both players playing. Yeah, I did see that. Verdict and Omnath, not cards that Hobbs necessarily wants to see, but Endurance is a card he wants to see.
Do we have lands in this hand?
There's an iteration. Everything we've named so far is not a land.
Right.
I mean,
that's a really good question too. Is like how few lands would you keep?
If you're on 6 cards and you have 1 land in Endurance, are you keeping? It's tricky.
It's like,
I'm glad I don't have to answer that question.
Yeah, no, it's like if you're playing against like black red and you have like double forcible but no lands, do you keep? And I think the answer is on 5, definitely. 6 is the weird spot, right? 6 is the weird spot where you can go down to 5 and so I think I would on 6. I wouldn't be happy about it. But no, actually, you know what? Mana is a bit too important. You just need to play the game. Like, I think I would go down to 5, actually. Yeah. On 5, I would be much more willing to keep a hand like that, but on 6, maybe not. Now, I see a Veil of Summer in Jonathan's hand, so maybe that's the kicker. If I have Endurance and Veil of Summer, I'm a little bit happier to keep a low land count hand and then just hope to peel, but that's a really tough question. Quite frankly, I wish I had asked you that first.
Okay, so both players keeping 6. And we'll get things going.
All right.
And Hobbs doesn't have any land.
Okay.
Wow. All right. So my personal history of no land hands. I remember years ago a Star City Legacy top 8 where a local Southern California player kept a no land hand with 3 Force of Wills against Sneak and Show and won.
What? Oh, dang. Okay, I guess, but I think I saw a copy of Grief and Zoe said, and look at that. Okay.
Wow.
Wow. Hobbs,
Okay.
the master, right there. I mean, which crazy too, because if that Grief gets Veil of Summer, oh my god, that's a feels bad for sure.
Yeah, that would be.
No!
Oh my goodness. This is
The script? I didn't write it. I'll be honest with you. That's so crazy. No lands, peel it, have the Veil, counter the Grief. That's a 3-for-1 right there.
oh my goodness. And then with Endurance still in hand, Hobbs is now well more than made up for the mulligan. Zoe Riederman is now down an extra card. Hobbs is up a card.
That's crazy. I couldn't. Oh my goodness! Like, and you could have seen too the energy that Hobbs you had to like draw the card, the land, and then slam it into play, and then fetch too. Like, probably laughing to himself right now, just like I cannot believe this is happening.
Oh my! Follow-up land looks at Triome, and Hobbs is rolling.
That's
and
crazy. I mean, this is magic. Like, this is really what it is. Like at the heart of it all, you make those clutch decisions, and sometimes you get rewarded for it. Sometimes you don't.
And Riederman had kept a 1-land hand, has not drawn the second one. This is tough.
Yeah, the tables just turned. So now the question is, how can Hobbs capitalize on this? So there's an expressive iteration. That's a really good way to capitalize on this.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy.
Oh.
Yeah, this is getting out of control quickly here. Hobbs has a land drop. Yes, indeed.
Right.
Oh.
Triome, Breeding Pool, Plains. There's another Grief. Okay, no Veil of Summer this time.
But now Chalice of the Void's on the board. All right, let's take a look at the hand. Counterspell, Endurance, another Endurance, Omnath, Solitude, Boseju. That's a good hand.
That reference to the triple Force of Will hand, now it makes a lot more sense. Looks like we kept Endurance, Veil, Omnath, so we could actually have... We had 2 pieces of interaction, we just didn't have mana.
Yeah, sure. The other one I had experience with was myself. I multi 5 in an invitational match on camera and kept a no land hand and was able to pull it out. So you can win no land hands. I mean, there's I mean, of course, we're setting aside the literal hundreds of times where players kept no land hands and died instantly, but we don't remember those. You remember the ones where the no land hands win, and Hobbs may be looking at one here.
Now, that being said, I mean, I'm not going to say Zoe's chances are gone here. We still have those foundation breakers to draw into. Maybe there's a way to get out of this Chalice of the Void. If we draw the second copy of Otawara, I do believe it can bounce artifacts as well. So there's a lot of work to be done here, but it's not like Hobbs is, applying that much pressure on the board. So maybe we get a couple extra draw steps. There's a game plan that we need to put together, that we need to form. You're playing in the top 8. The number one thing that I've learned is that in these tense situations, the first thing to do is to just not let your mental just go to waste, right? You have to be sharp, and you have to play your best until the match is over, and then you can do what you need to do. But yeah, here it's a dire situation for sure.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because it's easy to get down on yourself.
Right.
And yeah, you want to try and avoid that. And Hobbs's hand, as Omnath was selected there, Hobbs's hand is got a lot of disruption left that Zoe's gonna have to fight through. Does Hobbs have 4th land other than the Boseju?
And Abundant Growth is kind of a killer draw here too, because I think the reason to take the Omnath there is that it's basically a green card, right? That, you probably not ever going to really put into play until it's like super, super safe. Abundant Growth means now you can actually just hard cast one of your endurances too, because I don't think you had the second green source. Am I wrong? Is that a Ketria Triome?
It is a Ketria Triome. I'm not.
Oh god, the commentator thing is happening to me now, Joe. Oh, I don't know if I like these lands anymore.
See, that's what I'm talking about. All right. So, yeah, Hobbs picks up Yorion and now is looking at a spot where flash threats for days with a counterspell backup. I mean, this is going to be so hard. Okay, here is a fetch land. Fetching right away. I mean, you just throw down Yorion right now. There's really no punishment for it, as Riederman cannot threaten anything with just one land in play.
Yeah,
I guess Mystical Dispute would be a setback, but
that's a good card to make a read on. Yeah, I mean, with the 1 mana, but also, for Yorion specifically, I don't know if you care too much if it gets
yeah.
got. And another thing to think about too is that, well, okay, this Living End, like even if it did somehow resolve this turn, it wouldn't even be like that scary. I mean, it's just 2 griefs coming back, but
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe that's actually really good because I've seen people like turn 1 a grief in other formats, and it's spooky to say the least.
Well, there's also an Omnath in Hobbs' graveyard that would get to
Oh
come
yeah,
back.
yeah. So
And plus there's Endurance, so griefs probably aren't coming back.
right.
So this is the amount of work that Zoe needs to do here to come back in this game is looking like a tough ask, as Hobbs is really, I mean,
Drew a Veil of Summer too.
well, there's a second land for Zoe. Hobbs took a real risk, and on camera,
Yeah, right. Like
knowing that if he kept and just bricked a couple times, he's gonna look foolish. Took
that's
the
one of
risk.
those decisions where you either look really, really, really smart or really dumb. And Hobbs here pulling off the former. I said smart first, right? Yes, I did. Okay, see, I would just generally look really dumb in these situations. So I'm a little bit jealous here, but
No, Hobbs is looking great, as has developed into a very solid position. And once again, the thought process probably becomes not what do I have to do, but just how do I avoid screwing up because I'm in
right.
such a solid position. I just need to ride this out. And
Mhm.
yeah, Zoe down to 9. At some point, Hobbs will probably consider hard casting Endurance or Solitude, either one, just to either this turn or next to increase the clock to take 1 turn off of Zoe's life total.
Well, I mean, if we have quad and green, we could just flash both, and that's just lethal, right?
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. That would do it. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. I think you're right. I think that is in the cards.
My head is like turned sideways right now. I'm trying to look at the lands to figure out what's going on.
I'll help you out. The top one, the plains with the enchantment, that
Oh,
one makes
Joe, you
green.
took the easy one again, Joe. uh, but either way, like, I mean, so this is the thing too. This is what I was talking about earlier, right? Like, you need pressure. The pressure, it's like the hand was super scary. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't until the 4/5 came into play right this turn or the past turn, and like said, "Hey, well, now I'm going to close the game in 3 turns, which means you only get 3 draw steps, which means you need to draw really well." That's that's the power of just having the associated pressure with the counter magic backup or endurance or whatever it is. So it's pieces of the puzzle. You need to have the answers and you need to have a way to close the game here. Hobbs has it all, and that's why the board looks the way it is.
Yeah. Hobbs has left the table for the moment. Maybe need to ask a judge question or blow his nose or run to the restroom. Okay. So he is having a conversation with a judge that we're told by the table spotter. So we'll go ahead and wait for this. And this is, I mean, this is frustrating when you're on the edge of being knocked out of the tournament. Things look bleak, and then you just have to wait.
Mm. I do wonder because I was looking at the. I wanted to know for the other matches in the top 8 going on right now, what the
Uh-huh.
status is on those. If we have an update too, because I don't think this is the only 4-color versus Living End matchup.
Uh, you are correct about that, Honorog. There is another Living End versus 4-color matchup, so maybe we'll figure what happens there. Okay, so we received the question was regarding solidarity. Or I'm sorry. Well, I was told that I think Solitude was what was meant, but I don't have information on what the question actually was.
Maybe it's if I flash in like Solitude, do I have to choose a target? I think it says up to or may or something like that.
Yeah,
so
you do not need to kill your own creature. And now Hobbs is potentially starting his novel. I'm not sure what's going on over there on the notepad, but getting ready here. Yeah, Solitude is up to one other creature.
Yeah, just imagine like if in an alternate universe, Chalice had said like the amount of mana you spend instead of the converted mana cost or mana value. That
All right,
would
so
be completely different. So it looks like okay, on upkeep, we're going to endurance away hopes and dreams.
yeah, so I guess there is a consideration if Hobbs like runs out both endurance to try and increase the clock, and then I mean, violent. I don't know exactly what could even come out of Zoe's hand to mess that up, but maybe there's something. Here's a
Okay,
Solitude.
there you go. Subtlety is sweet.
Yeah,
Do
did
we
I
have
say?
a
Yeah,
dispute?
I said Solitude. I meant Subtlety. You're correct. There is the counter spell. Okay, that gets dropped. So Hobbs will not have the win this turn, as the mana did have to be spent on counter spell, but the endurance will trigger unless Hobbs forgets about it.
Now
Or maybe
it's not lights out yet. I mean, if we can get rid of that Chalice this turn with the foundation, like an evoked foundation breaker, Living In will still clear the board,
that's
which
true.
means, but it'll bring back the Omnath. Okay.
Well, this
Tricky.
Foundation Breaker may still be on the stack. Okay, Waker of Waves being activated to look at 2 cards. Zoe will take 1. The other one goes to the graveyard.
Is there a second subtlety maybe that we found off the Waker?
All right, graveyard is gone. So you're right that Cascade will clear the board for the moment, although it will net Hobbs a Omnath and a card, but the Chalice is still on the board. This is Zoe's upkeep, so the mana has been spent for the turn. There just doesn't seem to be a lot that can be done here. Jonathan Hobbs, well constructed deck, well played, well rewarded for the risk that he took on his opening hand this game. Went to 5 in game 2 and lost. Went to 6 this game, was like, I don't have a land, but we saw what happened when I went to 5, so I guess this is just what we're going to do. 7 damage comes across, and this is looking like it'll be the last turn. And if it is, Zoe Riederman, congratulations on running to the top 8 of the Energy Showdown, but your path is going to end here as Jonathan Hobbs is looking to position himself in the top 4 and ready to move onward.
Yeah, just as an update, all the other matches in the top 8 have completed. We'll get the results of those shortly, but that means that we'll be able to go to the top 4 soon. So I mean now, oh, there's the handshake. Okay, yeah, and looks like next card was the subtlety, so maybe there was a chance to stop
Yeah.
there. But yeah, mana problems aside, yeah, this game was a very interesting demonstration of just how like you target certain combo decks and it's not always just about having the cards. I mean, like you can see in that match, in that game 2 and game 3, we both saw like how you play the match out also makes a big difference, right? So in that situation, Hobbs kept a hand that had multiple pieces of interaction, but no mana, right? That is a very non-traditional way to play games. Like I told you, right? If I don't have lands, I probably mulligan down to 5. Hobbs says, double endurance and maybe a veil question mark is going to be enough for me to keep this. And then I bank on maybe a land in the top like 2 or 3 cards, hopefully. And in this situation, it was there, and you saw what happened there. But in game 2, you sort of saw like we kept double counterspell on a mull to 5, and that wasn't good enough just by virtue of the way counterspell plays out in the matchup. You need the mana, you need to do a lot of things to get it to go well.
Yeah. So two thoughts here. First, if Hobbs doesn't draw the land for the Veil Somewhere that turn, still okay. Like potentially. Grief takes 1 endurance, still has another copy. So there was some slack there with some safety. Second, we just had game 3 of the top 8. Both players mulled to 6 and collectively kept 1 land. How does that happen?
Yorion things, man. The
guess.
Yorion messes up the math. I'm not liable for it. I usually send it off to legal to figure out or whatever R&D. I don't know what it is. To be fair though, Zoe did have 2 copies of Grief. So literally drawing the Flooded Strand that turn is what broke the game in half. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of crazy how. I mean, I don't know if you could have cast a Grief on turn 1 necessarily. Maybe you had to pitch the second Grief and you didn't want to do that. I think that's totally fine.
Sure.
The peeling the land there was powerful magic. That's what I will say.
Yeah, and also, how much of a hurry are you even in when your opponent misses their first land drop?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I've got time here. Anyways, that does conclude the top 8. We see that Jonathan Hobbs defeats Zoe Riederman.